Let us begin with something that appears compassionate but conceals a hidden wound, a recurring tragedy among those who feel deeply the illusion that by absorbing the suffering of others, we are somehow saving them. This, my friend, is not empathy in its higher form. It is unconscious identification, a psychic merging that desecrates the boundary between I and you. And make no mistake, where boundaries dissolve without awareness, shadow takes the throne. You may believe you are helping, that you are alleviating pain by taking it into yourself. But I must ask you, who gave you this assignment? Was it your conscious self acting in awareness, or was it a forgotten child within you, wounded, abandoned, and desperate to earn love through suffering? This is the burden of the empath, especially the unconscious one. You do not merely feel the pain of others, you become it. And in becoming it, you lose your center, you, soul, your sacred task. You were not incarnated to serve as a sponge for collective agony. You were born to become a vessel through which the self might realize its eternal dance with the opposites, light and shadow, joy and sorrow, separation and union. But the empath, in their over-identification, forgets this. They are swallowed by the flood of affect and archetypal projection, and in their drowning, they mistake absorption for compassion. No, compassion does not require you to bleed to prove your love. It asks instead that you remain rooted in your center while extending a bridge to another. This is the true act of individuation, to remain whole in the face of fragmentation, to be with the pain of the world without becoming it. So where does this pattern begin? The psyche is a vast library of images, myths, traumas, and forgotten voices. For many empaths, this absorption of pain begins not with a noble calling, but with a rupture in the earliest container of the soul. The mother, the child, sensitive and porous, detects the mother's unspoken wounds, her silent griefs, her unwept tears. And what does the child do? Not out of knowledge, but out of archetypal instinct. The child internalizes that pain, believes, if I carry this for her, she will stay. If I hurt instead, she won't have to. Maybe then she'll see me, love me, not leave. This is not love. This is survival. And so begins the martyr archetype in the empath, the compulsive need to carry what is not theirs, the unconscious belief that suffering is currency for belonging. And over time, it becomes a reflex, a script embedded deep within the unconscious. You see someone in pain, and before you can think, you become their pain. You bypass the sacred space between souls. You leap into fusion. You forget to ask, is this mine? When you do this enough, something tragic begins to occur. You begin to confuse your identity with pain, not just the pain of others, but pain itself. Your ego becomes a house of mirrors, echoing wounds that were never yours to begin with. You lose the thread of your own narrative, your own values, your own sacred voice, and then you come to me, not knowing why you feel exhausted, broken, anxious, disoriented. You call it anxiety, you call it burnout, I call it psychic invasion. Now let me be clear, empathy is not a flaw. It is a faculty of the soul, but without boundaries, it becomes a curse. Empathy without ego differentiation is possession. Empathy without shadow integration is martyrdom. Empathy without awareness of projection is emotional vampirism. Yes, let us speak boldly, because this must be said, there is a dark side to being an empath. Many of you absorb pain not to help others, but to maintain control, to be the one who saves, who heals, who matters. This, too, is a mask of the ego. It is the hero archetype hijacked by the unconscious, and it breeds dependency, not freedom. The one who always helps becomes the one who cannot stop. You fear that if you stop carrying others, they will collapse, and perhaps more terrifyingly, so will you. Why? Because their pain is propping up your identity. This is where the path turns. This is where the mirror shatters. You begin to see that you were not selfless. You were lost. You were not a healer. You were a vessel of collective grief with no inner filter. And the most haunting truth, the pain you thought was theirs was often a reflection of your own projected, then absorbed again in an eternal loop of unconscious repetition. It is here that the archetype of the wounded healer emerges not as a saintly icon, but as a deep psychological truth. The healer is wounded not because of some romantic spiritual contract, but because they have not yet healed their compulsion to heal. This compulsion is a defense against powerlessness. The child felt helpless in the face of parental chaos, so the adult becomes hyper-attuned, scanning every room, every tone of voice, every silence for signs of danger. And they mistake this vigilance for empathy. It is not empathy, it is trauma. So how then does one escape this cycle? First, you must descend, you must journey inward through the layers of illusion and false identity. You must ask, what part of me believes that love must hurt, that being good means being empty? And then you must wait, for the psyche does not respond to interrogation. It responds to invitation. You will begin to see that the pain you absorb becomes a mask, one that prevents you from facing your own. You carry others because you are terrified to carry yourself, and yet this is your task. This is your crucible, not to fix others, not to save the world, but to retrieve the fragments of your own soul from the ruins of over-identification. The world does not need more wounded martyrs. It needs integrated individuals. When you stop absorbing the pain of others, you will feel empty at first. Do not fear this. That emptiness is your soul reclaiming space. Let it echo. Let it breathe. You are not betraying anyone by saying no. You are honoring your own becoming. This, I say to you with the full force of the archetype behind my voice. The empath who refuses to individuate becomes a slave to the collective unconscious. You are fed upon by the projections of others. You become the psychic landfill of unprocessed trauma. You must become sovereign. You must learn the sacred art of discernment. Ask yourself, is this pain mine? Say it aloud. Let the question pierce your trance. If the answer is no, release it, return it, bless it, but do not house it. Let me tell you of a dream. A patient once recounted it, one I shall never forget. In the dream, She was walking through a burning village, carrying a heavy basket. Inside the basket were infants, crying and covered in soot. She walked for miles barefoot until her legs bled. At last, she reached the river. A woman stood at the edge and said, "These are not your children." And when she looked again, the basket was empty. That dream, you see, was not a fantasy. It was a revelation. She had carried the pain of generations' abuse, neglect, abandonment, and believed it was hers. She believed her suffering had purpose because it kept her loved. But when she awakened, she saw the truth. The basket was always empty. And so I ask you, what infants are you carrying in your basket? What pain do you clutch, believing it is your burden? If you could set it down, would you still know who you are? This is the terror of healing for the empath without pain. Who am I without someone to save? What is my purpose? If I stop helping, will anyone still love me? These are not questions to be answered quickly. They are to be lived, embodied, wrestled with, like Jacob wrestled the angel, because in that wrestling, something will emerge, not a new mask, but an authentic self. The self does not absorb, the self radiates. It stands at the center of opposites and knows how to hold paradox. It can feel the suffering of others without becoming it. It can walk into the fire without catching flame. And when you begin to live from that place, you will finally understand you were never meant to carry what was never yours. You were meant to become whole. And from your wholeness, the world will receive something far greater than pity. It will receive presence. Let us pause here, not to end, but to breathe, for the work has only begun. You have heard it said that presence heals, but what is presence? It is not simply physical nearness. It is not mere listening. Presence is the psychic state of being fully rooted in the self while remaining attuned to the other. It is the fruit of individuation, the rare state where one has encountered their own shadow, their own terror, their unloved child, and has not turned away. Only from this place can empathy become alchemy. Let me be clear. Until you have looked into the abyss of your own unconscious, until you have stood face to face with your own unloved self, you will unconsciously use others as proxies. Their pain will become a mirror. You will project your wounds onto their suffering and believe you are helping, when in fact you are replaying a myth. You will seek redemption in their healing and call it love. But this is not love. It is the seduction of the savior complex. The savior complex is a powerful archetype, seductive, divine in appearance, but deeply rooted in unresolved trauma. It arises when the ego, desperate to feel necessary, identifies with the divine healer instead of becoming the humble vessel through which healing may pass. It makes you believe that you are the medicine, that others will perish if you stop giving. How arrogant, and yet how human. You must forgive yourself for falling into this role. It is ancient, it is mythic, it is wired into the psychic bloodstream of humanity. But to remain there is to deny your own evolution. The healer must die for the healing to begin. Not die in body, but in Identifikation, the false self that thrives on being needed on being the only one who can help must dissolve. And when it does, something astonishing happens. You begin to see people not as wounds to fix, but as souls on their own sacred journey. Their suffering is no longer your chain. It is their teacher. You may walk beside them, but you do not walk for them. You do not carry their pain on your back and call it empathy. You carry your own cross. That is enough. And when you carry your own fully, consciously, something shifts in the field. Others feel it. They may not understand it, but they recognize it. You become an anchor, not a sponge, a light, not a mirror. Your mere presence reminds others of their own buried wholeness. But I must warn you, this path is not for the faint-hearted. When you stop absorbing pain, when you stop playing the wounded helper, you will be tested. The world that once praised your endless giving may now turn away. The people who leaned on you may feel betrayed. You may feel lonely, adrift, unsure. This is initiation. All true transformation requires the death of an old identity. And for the empath, the old identity is often built upon pain. I am the one who suffers for others. I am the one who holds the darkness. I am the one who feels it all. Let it fall like ashes into the river of your becoming. You are not here to feel everything. You are here to become yourself. Now, let us return to the psyche. There is a phenomenon I have witnessed time and again in the unconscious lives of empaths. A phenomenon I call the merging archetype. It is a primordial pattern where the individual soul forgets its boundaries and blends into the psychic material of another. This merging is seductive. It feels like unity. It feels like closeness, but it is not intimacy. It is enmeshment. It is the disappearance of the self into the other. In dreams, this often appears as drowning, or being swallowed by the sea, or entangled in vines that cannot be escaped. One patient dreamed she was wearing the skin of her lover. Another dreamed of sinking into her mother's body until she could no longer breathe. These are not dreams of love. They are dreams of possession. To merge psychically with another is to leave the temple of the self unguarded. And when the temple is unguarded, anything may enter grief. Fear, shame, rage. You become not a healer, but a host, and then you wonder why you feel exhausted after every conversation, why your nervous system trembles, why your dreams are filled with the voices of others. You have become a channel, yes, but for what? Until you root your empathy in the ground of your own self. You will attract those who feed on light but give nothing in return. They are not evil. They are fragmented. They are seekers of warmth, of wholeness, but they are not your responsibility. Let me say this plainly. You are not obligated to bleed for every wounded soul who knocks on your psychic door. Compassion does not mean self-destruction. So how do you reclaim yourself? Begin with the body. The body is the gatekeeper of psychic truth. When you feel heavy, ask, whose heaviness is this? When your heart races, ask, is this mine? The body will tell you. It speaks the language of the unconscious. Before the mind can interfere, then we turn to your breath. The breath is a thread that ties a soul to the now. When you inhale, do not inhale their pain. Inhale yourself. Call your energy back from every place it was scattered. This too is a ritual, and when you feel clear, begin the deeper work, the inner descent. Go to the root. Find the wound that told you your worth is in your giving. Find the memory where love and suffering first became entwined. Perhaps you were praised for being strong when you were actually breaking. Perhaps you were told you were so mature when you were merely dissociating. Perhaps you were loved for how little you needed, not for who you truly were. These wounds are not small. They are tectonic, and they form the very foundation of the empath's identity, but they can be healed, not by absorbing more pain, but by grieving the loss of the self that was never allowed to exist. Grief is not weakness. It is alchemy. Cry not for others this time, but for yourself, for the child who learned to disappear, for the soul who forgot its name, for the heart that mistook martyrdom for meaning, and when the tears come, let them wash away every false belief. Then, only then, will you begin to touch what I call the sacred center. This is not the ego. It is not a role. It is not an image. It is the self, the eternal, indestructible core of your being. From this place, empathy transforms. It becomes embodied, conscious, fierce. You no longer rush to fix or absorb. You learn to sit in the fire with another while remaining whole. You become a mirror, yes, but a clean mirror. You show them not your own wounds, but their reflection. And that is enough. You speak fewer words. You do less, but your presence carries more weight because you are no longer reacting, you are responding from a place of depth. This is the empath transformed, and the world changes subtly around you. You attract different people, those who seek truth, not codependence. You find that you are no longer drawn to every wounded soul. Your compassion has matured into wisdom. You begin to discern, this is not mine to carry. And you walk away not in coldness, but in clarity. And sometimes you will still absorb, you will still feel too much. You are human. But now you will notice, you will pause, you will release. That is enough. Let me close this part with a final image. A dream from a woman who had spent decades absorbing the pain of others. In the dream, she stood in a cathedral of mirrors. Each mirror reflected a different face: her mother, her father, her lovers, her clients. But in the center, there was one mirror covered in dust. She wiped it clean. And for the first time, she saw herself not as a reflection, but as a flame. The self is not a wound, it is a flame. And the task of the empath is not to become a mirror for pain, but a flame that burns with clarity, with sovereignty, with soul. You are not helping by absorbing what is not yours. You are disappearing, and it is time to return. But what happens, you may ask, when you return to yourself? What happens when you no longer define your worth by how much sorrow you can metabolize? The answer is unsettling to the ego. You may feel invisible. For if your identity has been sculpted around your usefulness to others, the carrier of burdens, the quiet listener, the ever-available container of pain, then to stand still in your own being. Without performing salvation feels like death. And that is exactly what it is. The death of the false self. The empath who has identified with suffering must walk through the valley of non-recognition. Suddenly, those who once leaned on you may step back, the phone might go quiet, the invitations to emotional emergencies may dry up, and what is left? Silence. But let me tell you, this silence is sacred. It is not the silence of abandonment. It is the silence of recalibration. It is the breath before the symphony. It is the womb of your re-emergence. This is the stage of psychic withdrawal, not in the pathological sense, but as a sacred rite of reconstitution. Here, you begin to remember yourself piece by piece, memory by memory, value by value. You learn to feel your own feelings without confusing them with someone else's. You start to ask, what do I want? What do I feel? Who am I when no one is hurting? And this dear soul is where most turn back, because to feel yourself raw and unfiltered after years of dilution in others' pain is terrifying. You are not used to your own voice. You are not used to taking up psychic space. You may even feel guilty for existing outside someone else's narrative, but this guilt is not your truth. It is the ghost of an old belief that love must be earned through sacrifice, that wholeness is selfish, that boundaries are betrayal. Release it. You are not here to disappear into other people's wounds. You are here to meet your own. You are here to differentiate, to separate from the unconscious fusion with collective trauma and stand in the sacred solitude of the self. This process will unearth every unhealed myth in your psyche. You may find that beneath your empathy lies resentment, bitterness, rage, not because you are unkind, but because your kindness was never reciprocal. Your love became currency in a rigged economy of emotional labor. Feel the resentment. Let it speak, not to act upon it, but to integrate it. It is part of the shadow of the empath, the unacknowledged anger at the world for constantly taking, and in that anger lies your power, because true compassion requires anger, not as violence, but as clarity. It is anger that tells you when a boundary has been crossed. It is anger that says, this is mine, that is yours. I will not carry what is not mine. The empath who cannot feel their anger becomes a doormat for the unconscious projections of others. But the empath who integrates their anger becomes a guardian of the sacred self. There is a difference between being open and being unprotected. The soul was never meant to be a sponge. It was meant to be a vessel strong, rooted, radiant. And so the time comes when you must choose. Will you continue the old pattern, absorbing, fixing, rescuing, or will you descend into the sacred fire of individuation and come out on the other side fierce? So verein, awake, let us consider the dream world again. For the unconscious speaks more truth in symbols than in words. One woman I work with dreamed of a church made of glass. Every time she tried to rest inside, people threw stones at the walls until they shattered. She would run out to protect the building, gathering the shards and pressing them back into place, slicing her hands over and over again. At last, in the final night of her analysis, she dreamed differently. She stood outside the same church, but this time She did not rebuild, she let it fall. And in its ruins, she saw a garden begin to grow. The glass church was her false identity, fragile, transparent, easily violated. The garden was the self-wild, rooted, nourished by what once seemed like destruction. Sometimes your healing looks like letting it all break. The persona of the good one, the strong one, the always there one, it must be released, not with bitterness, but with reverence. That version of you protected your inner child. It helped you survive, but you are no longer a child. You do not need to survive anymore. You are ready to become, and what is it that you are becoming? Not someone new, but someone true. You are becoming someone who can feel without fusing, who can care without collapsing, who can witness suffering without drinking it like poison. This is not detachment. This is maturity. For years, you may have feared that setting emotional boundaries would make you cold. In truth, it makes you warm, because when your energy is no longer bleeding out into everyone you meet, you can finally offer presence that is real, not performative. You no longer need to fix people to feel valuable. You no longer chase brokenness as your purpose. You return, at last, to your own soul's work. And now, from this place of reclamation, something deeper awakens. You begin to see empathy not as feeling what others feel, but as knowing that they too can feel what you feel. You trust their soul. You stop underestimating their capacity for growth. You release the arrogance that says, they can't handle it without me. You give others back their agency. This is perhaps the most radical act of love. And yes, some will fall away. They will not recognize you without your wounds. They will not know how to relate to someone who no longer self-erases. Let them go. Not everyone is meant to journey with you into the next octave of your soul, but some will remain, and more will come, souls who see you not as a container of pain, but as a partner in consciousness. They will meet you from their own wholeness. They will not ask you to carry them. They will walk beside you. And this, dear one, is the new world. A world where empaths are no longer martyrs, but mystics, not saviors, but sovereigns, not containers for pain, but conduits of clarity. The time of absorption is over. The time of embodiment has begun. And what does it mean to embody the healed empath? It means you sit in a room and do not scan for pain. It means you no longer interpret silence as your cue to rescue. It means you feel discomfort and do not rush to soothe it away. It means you trust that others have their own timing, their own psyche, their own self that guides them. It means you walk away when your soul whispers, not here, not now, not this. It means you breathe, you rest, you create, you speak when your voice trembles. You say no without guilt, you receive without shame. You become, and perhaps most beautifully, you feel joy. Again, pure joy. Not the relief of having helped someone else, not the brief high of being needed, but the sacred joy of being you, whole and unbroken, standing at the center of your own life. Let this be your turning, let this be your return. And so we arrive at the sacred threshold the final descent that is not an ending but a spiral inward, where truth lives not in logic but in symbol. Let us pause again and remember that the pain you have absorbed was never the enemy. It was the signpost. It brought you here. It cracked your illusions open like clay vessels so that you might see through the fragments and discover not all that breaks is broken. When an empath awakens from the trance of absorption, there is grief, but it is soulful grief, not despair. For this grief is a final purification, not of tears shed for others, but of tears finally allowed for yourself. These tears are sacred. They baptize you into your own humanity. You begin to see clearly, maybe for the first time, that love does not demand your suffering. That peace is not earned through self-erasure. That compassion is not codependence dressed in spiritual language. You now understand it was never your task to fix the world. The world does not want fixing. It wants witnessing, and this witnessing begins in you. You now stand as the witness to your own inner cosmos. The wounds, the longings, the unmet needs you tried to meet by becoming a vessel for the pain of others. You become, in truth, the observer, and the observed, the dreamer, and the dream. And oh, how strange it is to live without the compulsion to rescue. You feel useless at first, then free, then radiant. For now, your energy is not leaking into the abyss. It circulates like sacred breath. It animates the body, infuses your words, and glows in your silence. This is the paradox of the empath healed by ceasing to carry what is not yours. You finally become of real service, because what the world needs is not another person trying to feel its pain. It needs someone rooted enough to remind it of its own strength. You become a symbol, not an abstract idea, but a living archetype. You no longer chase the wounded to feel worthy. You no longer interpret discomfort as a call to perform. You become the healer, not through effort, but through alignment. And now your relationships begin to transform. You no longer attract only the broken, but those ready to rise. You no longer tolerate emotional manipulation masked as vulnerability. You begin to require reciprocity, not as a demand, but as a truth you embody. You say yes with clarity. You say no with peace. You speak the truth, not to wound, but to free. You no longer whisper when your soul wants to roar. You are no longer afraid to be misunderstood. You know that your integrity is worth more than your approval rating. This is the sovereign empath, the one who has died and returned, not as a sponge, but as a flame. You will still feel deeply. The world's sorrows will still touch you, but they will pass through you, not lodge within you. You will still hear the unspoken, still see into the shadows, but you will no longer mistake those shadows for home. Now, you know where home is. It is in your body, in your breath. In the moment you say, this is enough, in the moment you say, this is mine. That is not in the moment you choose truth over performance, peace over approval, wholeness over martyrdom. You will still walk with the wounded, but you will not lie down in their wounds. You will still love those in pain, but you will not enter their pain to prove your love. You will still extend your heart, but now you do it from fullness, not depression. You do not become less empathetic, you become a master of your empathy. You no longer absorb. You, Attune, you no longer carry, you witness, you no longer collapse, you rise. This is what it means to step into the archetype of the sacred mirror, not the mirror that distorts itself to reflect the pain of others, but the mirror that reflects others back to themselves with clarity, dignity, and light. And sometimes, yes, that light will burn. Some will look into your clarity and recoil. They will miss the version of you that folded to fit them. They will miss the way you once played small to keep them comfortable. Let them. Their discomfort is not your cue to shrink. It is their invitation to rise. Let them walk. Let them stay. Let them choose. But do not contort yourself to prevent their transformation. You are no longer the emotional container for someone else's delayed evolution. Your hands are open now, not to grasp, but to bless. This is not coldness. This is reverence. You have become what you were always meant to be, a sovereign soul in sacred relationship with life. Let this be known. You are not too sensitive. You are attuned. You are not too much. You are finally whole. You are not broken for feeling deeply. You were only lost because no one taught you how to feel deeply and remain intact. But now you remember that pain is not your calling. Presence is. You remember that you are not here to heal others by losing yourself. You are here to meet them in your fullness and invite them into theirs. You remember that boundaries are not walls, they are altars. And every time you say no to someone else's chaos, you say yes to your own sanctuary. And the final truth, the one that waits in silence at the center of all transformation, is this: you never had to absorb their pain to prove your love. Your love was enough. Your presence was enough. You were enough. And you are